So when we last left our friends, the diphthongs, we had just finished up I. Now, the same pattern is going to follow true with all these other diphthongs. The second vowel goes on at the last little nanosecond before you move on to the next sound. Our next diphthong is ow, okay? Once again, notice we use the flying U and not the little u, okay? So it looks like that, ow, ow, all right? So let's launch right into this on page 115. Again, we have a lot of spellings, maybe not quite as many as for I, but we still have a lot of spellings for this particular diphthong. Bound, trout, towel, sauerkraut, plow, out, cow, brow, allowed, hour. Okay? Again, as a native speaker, you're not going to mispronounce these, but be aware that there are a lot of different spellings for this diphthong. Okay? So, a little compare and contrast here with the next set. Couch, hand, hound, mass, mouse. Sorry, I almost read it as moose. Mouse, pat, pout, sand, sound. So you hear the ow in that second set of words. Okay? Then, next we have the pure ah contrasting with the diphthong. Again, as native speakers, you're not going to mistake this. This will be fine. But let's just listen to them. So we have ha, how, pot, pout, fond, found, bra, brow, clot, clout, ow. Remember that you use the ah plus the flying U. All right? So don't forget, no little u's going on in this diphthong. Again, same pattern with putting the sound on at the very end. Okay? Now, she points out, be careful, don't stick it in your nose. Not brown, right? Brown, down, found, town, lounge, fountain, noun. Notice I'm dropping my jaw to get that ah sound out. Otherwise, it might go in my nose, which is not a very attractive singing sound. Okay, great. Now, let's look at what would these sound like, for instance, in 78th note pattern. Let's look down at that second set there. Flowers shouted downtown. Here I'm waiting for the second vowel until right at the very tail end of its appropriate note. Okay? Same pattern for the next diphthong. Oi. Again, capital I at the end. So we start with the open O, right? Open O, followed by the I. Okay? So, boy. And that's represented by this diphthong right here. Oi. All right? Be sure it doesn't close down to an E. We don't say boy anyway, right? However, when we get into other languages, we will close it down more. All right? But English, frankly, tends to be a little more relaxed than the other languages that we study for singing. Okay? So, we don't have so many spellings for this. O-I, O-Y, that's pretty much it. So, oyster, boil, coy, join, deploy, destroy. All right? So, you want to make sure you get both sounds in there, otherwise you may change the meaning of the word. So, poise as opposed to pause, or what does she have? Paw was, okay? I don't know whether anybody would mistake that or not, but anyway. Joys, not jaws. Noise, not gnaws. Okay? Again, as native speakers, you're not going to mess this up. All right? So be sure that you get the I in there. Otherwise, it's going to turn into just the plain old aw, which is going to change the meaning of your word. So all by itself, but with the diphthong, oil, right? Sol, soil. Tall, toil. Ball, boil. Fall, foil. Remember that diction is all about clarity of your words and hence your meaning for the audience. As musicians, we're the only ones that have to communicate the text, and people expect to be able to understand us. All right? Same idea we've heard before. Let's see, we're down. How about the bottom, very bottom one? Join, coin, moist, joint. Okay? So you hear both sounds clearly, but the second one is much shorter than the primary one, the first one. Okay? Great. So let's continue on. Now, the next one isn't really a diphthong per se. I would class it as a phoneme. In other words, it's really almost one sound together. So we have the J, which represents the sound Y. Now, if you've studied German at all, you know that the J gives us that sound like an Ja, okay? It's essentially our Y when Y acts as a consonant, okay? So it's Y plus U. So we get some of these words where we pronounce them as U as opposed to U by itself, represented by the J glide plus the U. The J glide does have its official name. It's called a yacht. We'll call it a J glide for now. Okay? So, how do you know? Well, be glad you're a native speaker, because typically there's no rhyme or reason to why we do some one way and why we do some the other way. So, these words on page 123 do use the Y. Okay, use. If you didn't have the Y, it would just be us, right? Eulogy, unit, uniform, usual, euphony. Euphony, there's a word we use a lot, okay? Some that are in the middle, the medial of the word: abuse, refuse, amuse, viewer, cube, puberty, fewer, mutilated, music, bureau, huge, curious. So for instance, the word music, what would it sound like if you didn't put the Y in there? It would sound like the German word Musik, right? Musik, music, all right? Why? Who knows? Why is it not spelled with a Y in the spelling? Who knows? All right, so some of these words, now the third set down there, can be done either way. So we could have due or do, tube or two. Tube does sound a little pedantic, doesn't it? Dew, tulip, sounds a little prissy, but sometimes you might want to do it that way. Exude, Tuesday or Tuesday, new. And if you listen to, for instance, news broadcasts, sometimes you'll hear this is the evening news, or you'll hear the evening news. Actually, those both sound okay. Numeral, I don't think I've ever heard hardly anybody say nude. That makes it sound somehow dirty. Nude, okay? Nuclear, okay? Not nuclear, nuclear, or nuclear. Again, to an American ear, that sounds a little stuck up. Okay, so those can be done either way. I would accept either or either one on a test. Okay, now there's a good example of a word either. Could start with a diphthong or just start with the E sound. It's a preference for you and in consultation with your teacher. Okay, I don't think anybody's going to have a real problem with any of those. Let's flip the page now to 124. Again, these are words that could be either, although typically now we do them without the Y. So suit as opposed to suit, suitor as opposed to suitor, lute as opposed to lute, Lutheran as opposed to Lutheran. Sounds like the prissy old lady in the church basement, doesn't it? We're Lutherans. Resume, absolutely or absolutely. Suitcase, suitcase. You hear the difference. Enthusiasm, enthusiasm. If you were doing some Gilbert and Sullivan operetta, you might want to add the Y in there because it sounds more period. Otherwise, again, it's your artistic choice. But you want to be clear whatever you do. Be sure it's clear.